everyone, and welcome to the Family Gaming Experience. I am Weston Bell. I will be running the show tonight, and I am, of course, joined here by my group of guests and co-hosts, and we are so excited for this episode. What? You're smiling at me.
Nothing.
Weird.
You're just really cute. That's all.
She's like, you didn't do it the way I do it.
No, I didn't.
So I am Weston Bell, part of the party of two, and across from me is the lovely, gorgeous, and beautiful, my wife, my forever, Hayley.
Oh, I'm here forever?
Yeah.
Oh, this is really sweet. Let's stop before everybody gags.
It's fun seeing true love in action.
Well, we love each other a lot. And our child just stepped in the room. Oh my gosh. I swear I gave them melatonin. Do you want to say hi? Okay, I've got to go be a parent for a second.
Parent experience, apparently. So I guess we will put on hold the announcements for a moment. And we will instead have our co-host and partner in this endeavor, Jerome. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself again to our viewers?
For longtime viewers, I am Jerome. I run Lost Tribes Gaming, adjacent to the group here, and I'm really looking forward tonight because one of the things that we're going to be talking about is a lot of homebrew stuff, and that's something I've really been exploring a lot lately in both my D&D games as well as my Marvel Superheroes games. So, kind of stoked about that.
You're doing quite a few different systems in your channels.
Three total right now. Yeah.
Blows my mind. I can handle the Pathfinder right now, and I'm trying some D&D, and 2 systems alone is hard for me. And so, yes, as Jerome said, tonight we'll be talking about homebrew and dad jokes, because we got a bunch of dads here, especially our 2 guest stars from it's Dadvantage. Is that the way I say it?
That's the way. The
All right.
Dadvantage.
So why don't we start? We're going to have Michael. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Dadvantage?
Hey there. So I'm Michael Hall. I'm the Mike version of the Dadvantage. Look, we built this podcast mostly because we love playing D&D. I mean, the dad part was more of our way in to think about, like, what do we have to say about D&D that's unique, because there's a lot of D&D podcasts out there. And I think, Andy and I both go back many, many years. We're super old school D&D players. And what brought us back to D&D was being dads and teaching our kids how to play and really getting a kick out of it. So as we started thinking about, like, what do we have to say, we both realized what we have to say is a lot about, like, how do you bring people to the game? And that's what we love to do. We love to talk about, if you listen to our podcast, The Dadvantage, Andy will do all our socials. He's got it. I was about to go there, and I'm like, no, I don't know.
Andy, why don't you go do that for us?
Yeah. So, hey, you can find us on Facebook at The Dadvantage Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at _Dadvantage. And hey, look, it's right there underneath my name and Michael's name on the overlay, which is awesome. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like a professional thing or something. Yeah, I mean, the shorthand that we usually introduce the podcast is, we're 2 old school dads who are embracing new school play, because it's, the game has changed from when we first, Michael and I both first learned to play in, first or second edition. And then we stopped for a while and we've come back to it, and, it's very different. And in a lot of ways, it's much, much better. So we try to sort of embrace that part of it and, push down the inner grognard. We got a lot of white hair going on, but we want to embrace the youth and all that good stuff.
There is great.
We were the Stranger Things prototypes.
Yes.
I was going to ask. So what edition is Stranger Things playing? Are they playing?
I believe they're playing 5th edition, actually.
Yeah.
It's
shocking,
the
right?
Accuracy is
it's so horrible.
Andy.
No.
Andy.
I did actually recently see like an article about this, and they were saying basically that they want to make the game accurate to what their audience is seeing and playing right now. So they've kind of like it's and let's be honest, THACO does not make good TV, right?
No.
Like, you know, having to like consult the charts and see like, did that actually hit?
Did that really
None
hit?
of that
Yeah.
makes good
My-
television, right? You know,
my
so
answer
they're
is
rolling a
a
D20.
lot
That's all we
simpler.
care about.
Well, let's
Yeah,
before
sorry,
we
Nate,
dive
I
into that too
Oh,
much.
sorry,
Haley,
sorry.
did you want to do intro before?
Oh yes, we do have a really cool announcement. The Family Gaming Experience is officially now a podcast. It is its own podcast. So if you would like to go find it, it is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google. Maybe Google does this whole thing where it's like a holding period and they're like, we'll let you know. And I'm like, okay, this is like dating. It's very frustrating. So it might be on there at this point.
Coming soon to Google.
Yeah, coming soon. But go find it there. I actually have edited it and put like intros and outros and little break things. Like I feel very professional and proud of myself. So go listen to it and follow and rate and review and do all of the clicky clicks.
There you go, all the clicky clicks.
Brilliant.
All right,
Congratulations.
Like that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
so with that, let's go ahead and we'll officially jump into this episode of the Family Gaming Experience. So I couldn't do intro and all that when you weren't here. So
I know, because it's our little dragon.
it is. So as we mentioned, today we're going to be talking about homebrew. We're going to be talking, and we've got to start out though. Before anything else, who wants to be the first one to throw out a dad joke?
No, they already started, babe.
Oh no, but
I will pitch Andy. Andy's our resident. I'm sort of a guest star on the dad joke side. Andy's our resident dad joke expert. So I'll pitch to Andy.
Given the whole, we were just talking about the socials, how do the Aarakocra send messages?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Through Twitter.
Ooh, that was a
Oh, there we
groaner,
go.
man.
Haley doesn't know what an Aarakocra is.
What's
Aarakocra, they're bird people.
They're bird
How does
people.
how does a
Oh!
bird person? How does a
Okay.
sorry guys?
No,
how does
I
a
got
bird
it.
person?
I got it now.
That landed really badly.
No,
I'm so sorry at
Haley-
my ignorance.
We are still
Totally destroyed that joke.
Haley's newer. I'm the one really digging into the D&D and the builds and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're still fairly new to all the different races and all the different things.
Yeah, I don't read them the way that Weston does. He sits in bed at night and I'll have a novel open and he's got the game manual.
Yes.
And he's
Right
reading monsters.
So I'll throw one out here. This is one that Haley really liked. What's the difference between a wizard? What's the difference
Oh.
between a wizard and a sorcerer? Class.
I don't know. Oh.
Oh snap! Ching, ching.
Haley loved that
I
one.
like that one a
that.
lot.
I like that one. That's good.
So now, with one dad joke down, we'll be sure. Oh, two down. Also, in the chat, if you have a dad joke that you want us to say or you think would be great, throw it in the chat, and if it's good enough, we will deem it with worthiness to be read.
I say we just do it.
Awesome.
Because the ones we've got are so great.
If you've got it, you've got it.
So,
What defines a really good dad joke is the groan that follows it. That's
Yes,
really
it
like
is.
that's what makes it good.
Silence,
That's what I learned from my
groan,
father.
laugh.
Yeah.
yes, with an eye roll. Hopefully, an eye roll.
Eye rolls are good. Good reaction.
If my daughter from the other room groans, that's a winner.
That's a win.
Yep.
So one thing I want to start off with, you talked a little bit about how you started into, D&D and how you started into the podcast, but define first a little bit more for people who don't know your show. What is Dadvantage all about?
Andy, do you want to? Oh, I'll take this one.
Yeah.
So again, Andy sort of hit it at the top. It's like, look, we both have really started to believe in 5e as just a platform because it's a really easy platform to bring anybody into gaming. It's really open-ended. It's really easy to play. It's easy to play with a bunch of different styles of play, and it really look. I love me a good crunchy numbers game. But 5e really allows for a lot of open-ended flavor, and that's why it's so successful. And Andy and I believe in it, so we believe as two old guys who've played every version, I started on original in 1976. This is the version I enjoy the most. And we wanted to talk about it because we would call each other up and talk about this. And we're like, we really should record this. Like we're just talking about stuff. Like, why not do this? And so that's sort of how that was the beginning, And we've known each other a really long time. Yeah. It was kind of natural.
And I think, awesome. I think there are other systems, there's tons of other systems that people can play games in, and 5e is by no means the simplest. It's not the most crunchy, but it has a huge population behind it that is interested and engaged in playing with it. It's growing all the time, and as people kind of start to think of it more as a platform and start to do, there you can get science fiction overlays that use the same basic mechanics. You can get superhero overlays. Like there's a lot of other stuff that you start to see it as like, oh, so instead of having to learn a whole new system, instead of having to learn a D6 pool, a dice pool oriented game versus a D20 system, the way like Mutants and Masterminds is, instead of having to learn all that, you just have you understand the basic mechanics of how combat work or whatever, and then you can you add in the extra bits that make that you need for science fiction or something else. And I think that's kind of, and then it just makes it easier for people to kind of move into those other genres and other areas, which I think is pretty cool.
And the natural progression is always Pathfinder.
Yeah, and look, Pathfinder's fine. Like I got nothing but love for all the TTRPGs, right? Yeah. Nothing but love. I think the big thing for us is we like to talk about flavor. So while I may be a min-maxer in my private life, I'm a flavor player in my gaming life. And I think what we love about the system and what we love talking about is how do you make the game fun?
Yeah.
How do you, if it's homebrewing, how do you introduce things into the game that are fun? If it's character creation, how do you make the character creation fun? And we balance back and forth between our sort of really crunchy, flavorful ways of describing what you can do with D&D and ways to bring new people into the game. And that's what the Dadvantage is. It's a mix of really deep sort of how do you make your game more flavorful with how do you introduce people and bring people to this wonderful experience that is TTRPG with the gateway drug being D&D.
Yeah. Well, very true.
And I know for me, when I first started playing, I'd read through the books and I'd read through I read, I'm not that guy who just goes to the stats section. I go read the lore section first. And I really did find myself trapping myself a little bit.
Yeah.
In having to match the lore that was presented. I know 100%. We play Pathfinder, and Pathfinder, there's only one world. So whereas D&D, you've got Eberron, you've got
Ravnica, you've got Forgotten Realms, you've got now they've got Radiant Citadel, which I think is actually part of Forgotten Realms. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they've got you've got Greyhawk, you've got all the old
So
you've got Dark Sun.
Yes.
Dark Sun, yes.
Not family friendly. If you're interested in family friendly, don't look into Dark Sun. Not so great.
But, well, and then nowadays you've even got tons of other systems that they're not actually new systems. They're D&D 5e. We just threw our setting on it.
Critical Role is a 5e setting. Exandria is a 5e setting that is not part of the larger Wizards thing. It's just another world. It's another
endorsed by
Wizard of the Coast,
heavily produced by.
Yes.
Well, and it's funny because you can tell they were playing Pathfinder before because a lot of the names of things that they have in that are
they switched. They were playing Pathfinder right until I'm a huge fan of Critical Role. I've been watching since the very beginning. It was terrifying when I think about how many hours I've spent watching that show.
Let's not talk. We once calculated if you watched all of campaign 1 and campaign 2, how many hours you watched.
It's terrifying. But one of the things that I do remember, because they moved to Geek and Sundry and started streaming it right as 5e was launching, and they switched to 5e during the game. So there's like, if you watch some of the early episodes, a lot of the players are like, wait, I have to do this now.
what?
They're like they're a little lost
especially
in the
with
system.
Especially with Percival, the gunslinger.
The gunslinger class.
Because it didn't exist in 5e.
No, that's a
Firearms?
Pathfinder mechanic.
Yeah.
But because Pathfinder it has its set location, and it's that for everything. There's a ton of lore, and I loved reading it, but I also then trapped myself because I was like, I have to build the character, and I've got to match the lore to the location.
And I would even argue sometimes it's not even so much they have to match the lore, you have to match the mood.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that is one of the things that I love about sort of the current generation of watching all these live streamed games and everything, is you see that range of play, right? You see very silly kind of, like, I don't know if you guys watch Dimension 20, another shout out to Dimension 20, excellent show. But like Crown of Candy they're all candy people. It's candy people, but it's Game of Thrones. It's like crazy tonally, and there's a lot of stuff like that you'll see some games that are very kind of loopy and silly and goofy, and to drop, it can be funny to drop a super serious character into that, something very, very grimdark. But
it's much easier to drop a serious character into a funny game than a funny character
into a serious game. Funny characters in serious games that just die.
Well, that's like I know I'm playing a game with Jerome in the nights when I'm not streaming, and I'm playing a ranger, and it's like, okay, I want to play a ranger. I was playing Gloomstalker Ranger, generally very broody. Like, this should be your broody ranger. Instead, my inspiration for him, because he's gonna multi-class in the rogue. Jerome just wanted to do
very
that.
effective.
Like, hey, DM, by the way.
We'll talk about that later.
From the min-max perspective, very effective build.
But I saw him more as Ryan Reynolds' character from Red Notice.
Yeah, there you go.
I love that movie.
And I was like, okay, how do I do this? Because I didn't want a broody. I was like, there's too many broody.
You didn't want Darkwing Duck?
Oh,
Aarakocra. I'm just going to pitch this out there as for somebody out there that wants to do it. Aarakocra, Gloomstalker Ranger, straight up Darkwing Duck. Artificer. You could have the guy on the wheel that runs around in that show. You could full on. Okay, I'm pitching it now to somebody. Somebody has to do a Darkwing Duck themed show, just a live stream where everybody's a Darkwing Duck character.
That is awesome.
I am so in love with that idea.
I want Huey, Dewey, and Louie are three. They've got to have like
3 goblins in a trench coat.
There we go.
Oh, Andy, killing me.
Please. Oh my gosh, we
All
have
right,
to do this
that's
now.
episode number 19 of the Dadvantages.
I guess okay, guys, we're gonna be trying to figure out how to do that.
You wanted to do
Like,
a
write it down.
group of gnome artificers who had their companions or something like that, and you do Power Rangers. No, it was the new from Unearthed Arcana, where you're the Rangers, the dinosaur Rangers that they have.
The dinosaur
And so you each have your dinosaur Zord that you summon, and then
Nice.
it's Power Rangers together.
Oh my god!
Like that's what we love about 5e, because again, all these things are possible. You just need to use your imagination, and you can do it for a one shot. You can do it for a multi shot. You can try to play it as a campaign. It's gonna be harder to play as a campaign, but like any of these things are possible, and that's what's so cool about it. And that's what's fun about it, and particularly introducing kids or just new players, because like to your point, it's really easy to get wrapped up in like the thing. I can only do the thing, and what we want to encourage people to do is don't get stuck in the thing.
Yes. Well, it's like, I know Hayley, she was having a hard time. We've got our characters built for our next campaign because we're planning. It's a very story heavy one and stuff like that. But she was having a hard time connecting with her character. It's a Hexblade Warlock. And she's like, I don't know. And then suddenly we're driving. We're fans of Brandon Sanderson and the Stormlight Archive.
Oh my God,
and I was like,
right.
Hayley, Hexblade Warlocks are shard bearers.
Yes, they are.
And suddenly her mind
I
went,
was so excited.
Yeah.
I was like, yep, I'm there for that now.
and so this is one thing that I've listened to some of your episodes, and I do love this perspective and this approach. And so I'd love to hear you talk just a little bit more about this. coming at it from not a build perspective, but a concept, a character concept.
Right.
But then you've got to try and figure out how within the game system, maybe with some changes, do I make this work?
That's great. Yeah, I'll kick off how we started that, and then Andy, you add in.
Yeah.
Look, we love. Andy and I just love pitching ideas to each other. We're constantly pitching ideas to each other. So part of this was like, okay, how do we turn this into something fun? Like, we'll just pitch ideas at each other. So we said, okay, well, what's the framework for pitching ideas? And because we didn't want to start with like a min-maxing approach, what we wanted to start with was, how do you lead with flavor? Because really what we'd like to talk about is, how do you introduce the fun into the game? So that was really the gestation of the idea for our head-to-head series, and we've sort of been trying to play other ways around the head-to-head stuff. But it was really like, so if we're going to start with flavor, the core element of flavor is a trope. The first episode we do is fish out of water. Like how do you introduce the idea of a character who doesn't belong where they are, right? And then how do you build a character around that idea? And what are the different ways in? And you can see that we come at it from very different directions. We've done the anti-hero, we've extended it to like, classes or different structures for DMs. Like, how do you do the Thieves Guild? How do you approach from the concept of a Thieves Guild, right? So there's just, we just want to show people that there are other ways into building your character than saying, I want a fighter.
Right. Yes.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
It's, and again, how can you do that in a way that makes it fun for yourself and really engages your creative process?
For me, like, Michael is a big min-maxer, and I'm actually medium-sized min-maxer. Medium min-maxer, is that a thing? Can you
medium
be a medium
No,
medium
it's
maxer?
gotta be the extreme. Not at all, or 100%.
Yeah.
Mediumer.
Yeah, you're medium. For me, I tend to start with it around like, I tend to start with the character idea, I'm sure like all of us, I read a ton of science fiction, I read a ton of fantasy, I read a lot, and I try to think about those characters a lot, and I'm always thinking of like, oh, this would be kind of an interesting character, something that maybe I haven't seen before. So I know I've mentioned it on the show. In my regular gaming group, one of my characters that I play regularly is, the Amazing Akimbo. Well, what is the Amazing Akimbo? He's an elf that is on the run, and the people he's being chased by, he's got to hide from them. So how is he hiding? Well, he's also a huge egotist, so he's hiding in plain sight. He spends all his time in stage makeup, and he's an escape artist, right?
Oh.
So he's essentially, now the build is very straightforward. He's he's an arcane trickster rogue, right?
Oh.
It's very straight, but he has the actor feat, and he just basically spends all of his time in stage makeup, top hat, the whole 9 yards. He looks like an old school stage magician, and he spends all of his time disguised as a human with makeup, so that when he's on the run from somebody, he takes his top hat off, he collapses it, and he takes his makeup off, and now he's an elf. So he can, in the short term, kind of hide as an elf with no magic. But it's just trying to think about like, who is this guy? And then it's sort of breaking it down to like, okay, well, who is this guy? Why is he on the run? Why would he be in this sort of circumstance? But it's just kind of trying to flip or I'm always trying to like find ways to take the mechanics of the game and kind of use them in unexpected ways, and then, yeah.
Well, there's also the doing different campaigns, I imagine, with those. Like if you're building some of those concepts, and it's like pure combat, meat grinder campaign, then it might be a little harder for some builds and stuff. That's like, I know.
And I think the thing though that we want to remind people is like, look, min-maxing, and I joke with Andy that I'm a min-maxer, but it's mostly like, I just like to know whether I'm building the most powerful character or not.
Yes.
And frequently I choose not to, because I'm a forever DM, and while I do play characters every now and then, it's up to the DM to make everything equal. It's not up to the players. I'm sorry. The DM makes everything equal. So, like, if everybody's min-maxing, guess what? You play harder, you fight harder bad guys. If one player is min-maxed and another one isn't, the player who isn't is going to get the cooler magic item, people.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
Well, or
That
you
makes
do more of
sense.
the, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of social encounters, and the min-maxed for combat character suddenly is
Is
sitting
at a
back there kind of like,
disadvantage.
What do I do? What do I do?
Well, it's like,
When I was DMing you, it was all social.
it was all social, yeah. Well, that's like, I think about, like we play Pathfinder, and there's an archetype, which for them, they've got multi-classing set up as these archetypes that kind of combine the two classes. They've got one that's a dandy. It is a socialite dandy.
That's awesome.
And
It
they're,
is so
all
cool.
of their feats are completely focused on their ability to make friends and create influence from a social standing. So you go to a party and you have the dandy, archetype.
Yeah.
You walk through and you can own that party.
Yeah, you can crush it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
They've
cool.
got the celebrity. You've got a celebrity
They've
one
got-
where you literally get all the feats, the charisma feats to make an impression on. Oh, you can make an impression on a group of 200 people if you have this
Yeah.
feat.
Nice.
Like this, there's a vigilante one too that's specifically set up to be a superhero. So you have an alternate
Yeah, in
identity
Pathfinder?
in Pathfinder. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
But-
I
but
love
this
that.
is where-
That was cool.
It's up to the GM then, like, okay, I want to play this character. In order for your players to feel the freedom to do that, they have to know that if they play a character that's suboptimal or that's, all their skills go in one direction, that you will know how to bring that into the game.
Yeah.
To that point about suboptimal, I think one of the things that's changed from when I was playing in the earlier editions, when I was younger, I definitely min-maxed the hell out of everything, right? As I've gotten older, one of the things I've realized is actually I love playing suboptimal characters, right? I love playing characters that have very, very deep flaws. Because as a player, if you're playing a character who has very low wisdom, or you're playing a character that has, very low charisma, something like that, or even low strength, like it's fun to like get into a situation where you're kind of stuck. It's fun to get into a situation.
exactly what
Fail.
you're thinking of.
Here's the thing: it's like failure. Everybody's like, "Oh, I don't want to fail. I always want to like be the hero that
Failure's fun.
failing
Failure's fun.
failing
We-
forward
we-
is so much fun. It's
So much
the
fun.
best.
Andy and I talk about this a number of times on the show, and we believe it firmly. The most fun you will ever have in any game, any TTRPG game, let it D&D and any of them, is the most fun you will ever have is failing a roll. Period.
Yes.
And especially if the player plays into failing the roll, it is like the whole party will laugh for hours about that epic failure. They won't remember they might remember a crit hit, but they're not going to remember I rolled max damage. Oh, like who cares? They remember the failure because the person played into it and it was funny and everybody laughed. That's what makes for good gaming. And it's hard to convince people of that because they're so focused on sort of the video game mentality of beating the game.
Winning. Yeah.
So I got to share a story with this one. Haley knows exactly which one I'm talking
totally know
about.
what
So
you're
we played a
thinking
game with another streaming channel where it was randomly rolled characters. And then
Nice.
even at the beginning we rolled to see which character we got. So everything was completely random. So I get handed this character sheet for a paladin who has a 6 wisdom. And I'm
Oh
like,
no, it gets better. It gets better.
like, all right, I have a 6 wisdom, and then I had a good charisma.
Yeah, really
I had
good,
good charisma, and then a really bad wisdom.
So we managed to convince the entire party.
Wait. And
that
I'm
this-
not trained in religion.
Because like that makes sense, right?
Oh, good Lord.
No, but he managed to convince, aka he did.
Well, no, wait, you can
Yeah.
let me tell you, you're missing a couple things. So I go in and we're in this crypt. It's taking place in the Forgotten Realms. Not Forgotten Realms, sorry. In the Elder Scrolls. It's the Elder Scrolls world. And in there is the god of madness. Something like that. He's the god of madness, and we're going into this cult of him.
Shannon
And-
Doherty, the god of madness.
There you go. There you go. So
That's
we go.
fair.
We walk in, and
fair.
there's these markings on the walls, And they're like, okay, well, roll. I'm like, okay, well, who should roll this? Well, I guess I'm the paladin. I'm not trained in this, but I roll and I fail. I think I nat one.
Oh my gosh.
I nat one to my religion check. And so I'm like, there are children finger painting in here. Why does this cult have children? And my charisma's high enough that I convinced everyone.
A whole group of people that they're children's drawings and there are children down here that we need to save.
Well, and it got worse later on because I found this cursed item and drank from this cursed cup that takes 5 from your lowest stat and puts it to your highest stat. So I had 1 wisdom and I think I had like an 18.
Oh my god!
You
charisma
ended up having like an 8. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And so
that's awesome.
It was trying to play this character. That was a struggle to play.
Yeah.
Like, how do you play a 1 wisdom? I
watched a live stream a few years ago where one of the guys was playing what's the frog race from Tomb of Annihilation? The grung. He was playing a grung. It was like a whole party of, there were nothing but grung, and it was just a little one shot. And this guy, it's Matt Colville actually. He would like, they're playing and he would like periodically roll, and somebody finally asked him, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm rolling my own wisdom saves to decide whether or not I'm going to do something dumb. And anytime he failed a wisdom save, he would just be like, oh yeah, he would just like wander off in a direction. He would like just go straight. He would be like, oh, you need me to open that door? Great. I mean, he would just completely like psycho kind of play, but it was awesome.
Well, I want to play with those characters, but I want to make it a Battletoads. You know, so it's a bunch of the grung fighters, and then is there a pig race that I can throw in there?
Could you do Mr.
That's what Homebrew is all about. Let's talk about how to do a pig race.
And then you've got the Battletoads campaign right there.
Nice.
Oh my gosh!
Nice.
And we can combine that with the pug race from
D&D, yes,
from Pathfinder.
But the funny thing was, I also had the other side of that because of the bonuses I had. I ended up fifth level divine smiting, 160 damage in 1 hit. So I was like,
insane. That's awesome.
In between the damage I had and the other one, I'm like, that was a very memorable character.
Yes, he stole the show. With
See,
that.
and that's what we're talking about. Is like the most fun you'll have is the weird stuff. And it creates memories. It creates great gaming for everybody, and it's that's what we think the game should be.
Yeah,
right, because it's just fun.
Which then
have fun.
I have to ask the question. I know you've done a couple of episodes where you have done these interesting builds, these concept builds.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite or one that at least that sticks out in the mind the most of that was a really fun concept build?
Yeah, so I'll go because I'm dying to play this character, and I've got maybe a game lined up where I'm actually going to be a player character for the first time in a while in D&D, because I tend to DM a lot. My favorite is the cursed one build that I did, where it's an artificer who was born without arms, and she was then raised by hags, and the hags sort of fused wooden arms to her, and all of her artificer stuff is not it's not mechanical. It's all little fairy things, right? So she'll pull out little fairies from her arm and throw them down, and they'll turn into an army that goes and does something. All the flavor is around turning what could be sort of artificer stuff into like what would the fairy equivalent of that thing be. And so reflavored all the spells, reflavored the way she works, and I'm dying to play her, because I think it's going to be just fun to play and make up like what is she pulling out now. I just can't wait to play it.
That would be fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
And I would probably play the next one I would really like to play is the character from Fish Out of Water, which was Sal Ariman, which is a salaryman, and he's just a straight up clerk who is he's a warlock. He's like a Pact of the Chain warlock, but he works for Acme Incorporated, which is like Asmodeus something or other machinations enterprises. So it's like, and all of it, and like, so Eldritch Blast he casts red tape, but it's like literally a blast of red tape and like paperwork that hits you. Nice. And he's essentially like, his job for this company is like when he summons greater demons, he calls his manager, right? So he like literally calls up a demon that's wearing like a white short sleeve shirt and a tie that has like a little thing that says manager on it.
Oh
you know,
my
he's
gosh,
got an intern.
amazing.
He's got an imp intern, which is Ken the imp turn, and Ken
You
is
need to
like
have, like,
always
a
has a couple
Karen
cups of
character
coffee and just like follows him around with coffee.
If you want someone to reflavor your characters, Andy's the man for you. That's really what we're talking about here. Because Andy's got nth level reflavoring skills.
So it's, I mean, and that's all just, I mean, and he's like, and this is like the funny thing that we were talking about, like, you know, the Amazing Akimbo is a very straightforward arcane trickster build, you know, with a couple of feats. You know, Sal Ariman is I'm really like horrible puns, so Salaryman, you know, and he's literally like, that's what he, you know, you talk about like, where do you get a character concept? It's like literally was just sitting around talking about like, oh, how could you make some, like, what would a clerk be? You know, what would a so-and-so be? You know, like, oh, well, you know, I played a one shot where I was literally Nick Nolte from 48 Hours as a character, and he was like an Oath of Vengeance paladin.
Oh my
And, you know,
gosh.
it 100% works. 100%.
Yeah,
he just walked
that
around.
is
He had a
awesome.
billy club out of his holy symbol was the badge, and he was like, I am the law. You know, I mean, it was very fun to play.
I know.
I think we talk about the character side of it, but you can do the same thing on the DM side.
Yeah,
Right. Like,
Mhm.
a lot of what we do, like when we think about these characters end up being NPCs in our games. Because like we want to play them, we love the flavor. The flavor works whether it's a character build or not.
Yeah.
So we can take these characters and drop them in as NPCs, and then you've got NPCs that are really interesting.
Yeah, well,
right?
it's like,
And have a little bit more spice to them.
I know recently in our campaign, Hayley's character got approached by an imp from Asmodeus sent there, and he was so that low-level gangster that, you know, my boss sent me here because we gotta make an arrangement, you know.
Jerome, was it you that said that he was?
Oh, what actor
dude's
was
name?
it that?
It's like Paulie
Joe
or something.
Pesci.
Joe
Yes,
Pesci,
Joe Pesci.
yeah.
Joe Pesci. Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe Pesci.
Joe Pesci's an imp. We all know this.
I mean, like, that was the whole thing, and like, I didn't know what to do with that. I'm sitting here like, what is happening right
Well,
now?
and I had carnival music start playing like the moment he walked in to make it so.
it was-
I know
it's the
one
whole
build.
thing.
One build I want to play. I haven't had a chance to be on stream because again I'm GM most of the time, but I should work this in as an NPC. I love that idea you had because a lot of times as GMs you have ideas for characters, but I'm the eternal GM. I'm always GMing,
Yeah.
and so
you are not the eternal GM.
Yeah, we flip.
You
off.
stop that right now. Okay, moving
Uh-oh.
on.
Oh, called out.
I think I heard that.
Dang.
I think I heard that foot hit the floor.
Yeah, I think so. We in our campaign, the way it works is that actually every story arc we switch. It's in the same world,
Oh,
same
nice.
characters, but then suddenly she's got control of everything in the story, and then
Nice.
we'll go that arc, and then back to me, and our PC becomes an NPC in that case.
I love it. Yeah.
But one I'm really would want to do is I want to play a bard, but I want to base it off of I'm a fan of Full Metal Alchemist, the anime. I don't know if you- I want to do a bard of Louis Armstrong, where my bardic inspiration is me flexing. You know, it's, you know, you need to see a perfect specimen, and then it's like bardic inspiration right there.
A high strength bard. That'd be
Yes.
awesome.
That would
Yeah.
be.
That would be pretty funny.
That would take that.
Read
trope
my
out
lips
of
and
it.
smell my breath.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. You could go with the Arnold accent the whole time.
But that's, you know, that is the
That would be fun.
funner side, because I know Hayley, we've talked about this a little bit. For you, tell me kind of what's your experience,
My
because you're not a huge fan of doing your character builds.
No,
Tell us-
I have been smacked around in the TTRPG community quite a lot because I don't like to do character builds. But mostly it's because I get so overwhelmed with the choices. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I don't care anymore. Just give me the sheet and I will play the person. Like, it's not, as an actor and having an acting background and like getting a degree in performance, like I'm used to being handed a character and saying, go figure it out, go and do. And so I've really struggled with character building, and Weston has helped me with things like making equivalents to things that I really like the Shard Bearers, the Hexblade Warlock, and things like that. But it's it's a struggle for me, but I love the way that you guys approach it, because you guys kind of like create a story and then like, well, how would this work?
That's it. And I think
so
that's the
much
recommendation ever. People, it's like, go pick your favorite character from an anime, go pick your favorite character from a movie or a book, and then just build it. And you don't need to do all this multi-classing junk. Like, look, I love me a good multi-class, but just think straight builds, because straight builds there's a lot to be done there, and they don't prevent you from having fun.
Yeah.
And that can really remove like the this heavy weight that comes with like the complexity of the rule set.
Yeah,
that can be just a barrier to most people.
Well, and I don't even like we play RPG games, and Weston's like, okay, let's get into the character part, and I'm like, can we just randomize, and we're done. Like, I don't care. And it kills him because he's like, what are you doing?
That is I can fully empathize with that. I'm, again, like for me, it's like I know I play a lot of D&D. I understand the rule set fairly well at this point, but even when I first was getting started, I would just pick very straightforward builds, or even pre-built characters sometimes, where I would just, and then you sort of look at it and you're like, okay, it's a dwarven fighter and everything. Well, how do I make that interesting? Like, I would set aside the name and all the rest of it, and I would probably sort of figure out like, okay, well, there's got to be a more interesting way to do that. I have like a not a dwarven, it's a halfling bard that is essentially, I was like, oh, I want a singing cowboy, like literally he's a halfling singing cowboy. So he just like walks around and like fringe and everything. And most of the time I'm just looking at like literally like just looking at media and going like, well, that's something I've never seen as a D&D player, that D&D character. That would be pretty fun. I reskinned Die Hard as a D&D module just to see how that might work, which is kind of bonkers. It's pretty fun. But as part of that, I was like, well, I've run it both ways, where the party is essentially taking John McClane's place, but I've also run it the other way, where the party is they're the villains.
Hans Gruber.
They're Hans Gruber.
Oh, that would be fun.
And it's really fun, but you have John McClane is the villain, so I have like a level 20 John McClane build somewhere in D&D Beyond, which is, oh man, he is freaking, and I made him as hard, like you talk about, he's a Gloomstalker Ranger, like all kinds of stuff, like super high constitution, like maxed out constitution and a bunch of other stuff. So, and he hits like a ton of bricks, so awesome. Yeah, it's like, I spend a lot of time sort of thinking about that sort of stuff of like, how do I take a trope or a kind of character that you see a lot and flip that around into a little bit of a character concept or an idea.
What's really cool about what Andy does and what he's talking about here is that there's nothing better than the recognition of your players.
Yeah.
when they figure out what you've actually put in front of them.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it's especially as a DM, right? It's like, I had there's a fairy character in my current game, and the fairy was like, she didn't want to go back to her hometown. So when they finally went back to her hometown, I had her meet a bunch of her high school bullies who were they were all fairies, and they were the feathers, right, rather than the heathers. Yeah. And like the recognition on everybody's face when they started realizing that they were interacting with the feathers. It was just again, it's like there's moments, right? You want to create these moments that just really suck the characters in and make them care about what's happening.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about like being a player in that, but as a DM, there's a ton of like, I'm in the middle of writing. We're gonna do a little. There's a sort of mini Gen Con going on at a local game store, and they've asked us to run like a family-friendly game. So I'm doing I'm putting together a one shot that's it's time to save the donuts, right? So like everybody,
it's always time to save the donuts.
It's always time to save the donuts. So you have to save Dolly's donuts is under attack. You've got to think. Well, I don't know if you guys. you guys are probably too young, honestly, but like there's that whole it's time to make the donuts guy from the Dunkin' Donuts commercials like a million years ago, right?
Well,
He was
we
just this
got
very
our first
sad
Dunkin' Donuts here in
say, you
Utah.
seem like great,
so...
Yeah. Well, yeah, Jerome, you know the guy then, right?
Yeah.
And it was just this sort of sad sack guy from TV commercials in the 70s, and I'm like, he's 100%. An orc version of that guy is 100% the baker who was working at the donut shop.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay,
Because it amuses me. And the people who do get it, like I'm going to be playing with a bunch of parents.
There's
and
not
kids.
an 8-year-old on the planet that's going to get it.
8-year-olds are not going to get it at all, but it's going to make me laugh, right? And so sometimes just seeding that stuff in there is a way to keep me engaged in it. I know a lot of people love their like grim dark, Call of Cthulhu, Elder Gods kind of rising up in campaigns. And I'm like, that's fun, but it's like I like finding puns and goofy stuff to insert all the time. I have
Andy and I are the same on that front. We love us a good little humorous hook.
I named a fire druid brother Chariza, right? Because he's Charizard. He's like literally Charizard,
Oh my God.
So a couple of like gnome NPC, they're gnome ranger NPCs. They were Lewis and Clark Merriweather. They're Lewis and Clark. They're like literally, it's just pun after pun after pun.
That's awesome.
Horrible.
So I want to throw out, there's a concept Hayley and I had for a start of a campaign that I think you guys would love this idea. And it's that each of you are the members of the tried to be adventures and failed support group.
Oh my God.
Perfect.
And
Awesome.
you all have some shortcoming that made it so you have some defect that made it so you weren't successful as an adventurer. Maybe what if everybody were Warforged? Yeah.
And like literally like it was like a mechanical defect that you have to like, have.
See, and I was
cyborg.
I was thinking more things like, okay, maybe the fighter,
An arrow to the knee.
He had the arrow to the knee or something like that. The wizard had bad short-term memory. Which, hey, he has to rememorize his spells every day, doesn't he? So it still works. But you build all those mechanics.
Literally
so you gotta
doesn't
find
remember
your
anybody in the party's name. Hey, so and so, you with the arrow in the knee, get that guy.
10-second Tom.
Why am I with all of you? It's Dory, from Finding Nemo.
Oh my God,
that bad. Like, and so you make everyone has to pick their defect, and then what happens is the main heroes all, get destroyed or something like that, and so they come to you and they're like,
it's the plot to Mystery Men.
Exactly. It's like it's the plot to Mystery Men. It's the exact one, and that would be such a fun one, both for your build.
Fun way to play. Yeah. I think that's the key, and like so, like when you think about all these things, it's just like make this game fun. Make this fun game fun. Now look, some people's fun might be the dark and scary stuff, and there's nothing wrong with Eldritch Horror. I can get into that quite a bit, but like we tend toward Andy and I we love to laugh, so we love anything that's going to make us laugh, and then we hope it makes the players laugh. Honestly, we don't really care. We just want to laugh.
Like if the players get it, great. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
But I'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
Why do you guys think? You too, Jerome. This is a question for all three of you who have been in the industry a little bit longer than us by a long shot.
We've been playing for 2 years, so
Okay.
Yes, we're babies. Why do you think that in the TTRPG, the way people view it is that it's like really dark and really kind of scary to outside viewers?
It's a great question. I'll take first pass and pass around. I think, look, there's a halo to this, right? And the halo comes, like we see it play out in Stranger Things, like that. The satanic panic was real. I grew up in the middle of it. There was discussions in my hometown about it in Connecticut, and my town was very progressive. And I ended up actually teaching through my local rec department. As a high schooler, I was teaching middle schoolers how to play, and everybody was down with it. Everybody was cool with it. But there was a conversation, right? And I think that you can't ignore that sort of tinge that comes from like wherever that source comes from around anything that's Dungeons and Dragons has to be sort of bad. I think you then you put that into the grinder of pop culture that loves some horror, and you end up with sort of a tinge of darkness. But when you look at the actual plays that are successful, when you look at the content that people are consuming in the space right now, there's always a sense of humor to it. And I think it's because if you've ever played a dark campaign, and I've played a couple of them, it's a slog at some point, right? Like there's a point in a dark campaign where you need to lighten the mood because it's hard to care about a dark campaign, and creating character emotion and making your characters care about what they're doing is hard for a DM, and especially if you're talking about a year. It's hard. So again, I think it's just a lot of some of it's the roots of what people think of when they think of D&D. I think the second part is just pop culture loves it, some good horror.
Well, it's like I remember, what's the movie with was it Tom Hanks, Mazes and Monsters?
You stole my bit, man.
Oh, snap!
I was gonna let Jerome go, and I was gonna say I blame it. Then I was gonna be like, I blame it all on Tom Hanks. It was like Mazes and Monsters, I think, was the movie.
Yeah,
and it's and the book. And a book, but yeah, I think Michael has it spot on. D&D had its first moment in sort of the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and then there was definitely this moment where kind of popular culture turned on it a little bit. Sort of the cartoon was out there, and to be fair, like D&D and as sort of the progenitor of a lot of role-playing games and all the rest, it has, it's coming out of wargaming. It definitely, we talk a lot about the three pillars of sort of social and combat and exploration. In the first editions, there was no understanding of those pillars so much. Like, it was combat, right? It was exploration and combat. You were there to
Good point, Andy.
fight. You were there to fight monsters and kill monsters. And I remember very vividly. So I came back. I had started running games for my son and some of his friends, and I was playing in my first game at Games of Berkeley. Shout out to my friendly local game store. And I was playing just straight up rogue, kind of like orphan, raised on the streets, chaotic neutral, classic murder hobo. And I'm playing with this other party, and it's all guys like my age, maybe a few people a little younger, and straight up, like, we had some goblins that were captured, and I straight up was like, oh, well, Kadri's, we had told, we basically like released one, and I straight up was like, yeah, I'm gonna kill him. And like my whole party was like, wait, whoa, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we're playing D&D, right? That's what you're supposed to do, is kill all the goblins and the orcs. Like, they're the monsters. I was like literally like total like confusion for a good 5 minutes before and then once I worked, I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense to like be a little, maybe slightly less murder hobo-y, slightly more like apply my own personal ethics to this. Like, I would never actually do that in real life. So it was a little bit, it was definitely like an eye-opening moment for me. But I think that's the history of the game is in that place of, yeah, of course you're going to torture the people to get the information. Of course you're going to do all this stuff. The reality of the game now, and the reality of, as we talk about new school gaming, reality is now is it's a much healthier and frankly a more robust, it can deal with a much wider range of emotion. It can deal with a much wider range of storytelling. You don't have to be like literally this band of people who are wandering the earth, killing every town, destroying the economy of every place they visit, laying waste, as you move from place to place. Like,
it's not a video game.
I think that sounds so much like Diablo, like original Diablo.
You're describing this, and I'm like, it's Diablo.
Well, and you have to understand, like, when D&D was built, there weren't video games like that.
No.
So D&D as a construct was way before video gaming as it's become. And it came out. Jerome, I'll turn to you in a second. Sorry, but like it came out of like the whole fan experience that grew up around D&D was like Fangoria magazine, and like the underground of like people interested in wargaming were interested in Wes Craven horror and like those types of things.
It's the emo kids.
or George Romero, Night of the Living Dead. That's where it came from. I think the reason you see it now is just, again, it's all the things we talked about. Jerome.
So tag teaming off of that, and actually funny that we touched on Diablo. Dungeons and Dragons actually had a lot to do with the RPGs for video games in and of itself. I mean, when they first started hitting, if you go way back, and this is, for people who are still kind of new to the space and who may not know, back before Windows even, they started hitting, and SSI had an entire run of Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance games that they put out for the 386 and 486, which would eventually become Pentium chip, and I mean that's how far back they go. And you can actually still find them in packs. The graphics are terrible and whatnot, and it's old school.
I think those
Dungeons
just went
and
on
Dragons,
sale a couple weeks ago.
They did, yes. That's why I brought it up. So
We covered
just
it
by
in
even
TTRPG
looking
news.
at those, you'll see, you'll even get a chance to see like how those games and how that company help inspire, the games like Dragon Warrior you would see on Nintendo, or Legend of Zelda, and so on and so forth. But kind of back to like why, and again, this is all my opinion, but if you look at the vast majority of the RPGs that are out there, both past and present, almost none of them carry any sort of comedy element to it whatsoever.
No.
There was very few of them that had that, like Paranoia and Tune, or whatnot. Or kind of like if you look at like a little bit more zany RPG stuff, but for the most part, all of it took itself seriously. So if you're judging a book by its cover, which a lot of laymen's who are, outside in looking at the gaming world in and of itself, and like, how do people get into this? It's all presenting itself in a very serious light. It's like, oh, that's a cool looking superhero. Oh, that is a rad Larry Elmore picture. Holy cow. Like, look at all this. So you don't get the opinion that when you play it, it's going to be, oh, it's hilarity ensues sort of thing. You don't really know that until you start meeting with people and you find out, oh, hey, failing it's not that bad. You're gonna make it's gonna be punny. There's something hilarious could come up from it. It's not the end of the world. And to your point, because I do run a lot of Vampire Masquerade, which is a very dark game. When after Dungeons and Dragons had its heyday, and it started transitioning to 3.0, and the World of Darkness took over, it became fab to run dark games. And in many respects, it still is. You still have an entire subculture to the RPG market, like Call of Cthulhu, and even the variants of Call of Cthulhu, and all the World of Darkness games, which now, actually they've got a couple different types. And Ravenloft hitting as hard as it did, when it came out, like people wanted that. They wanted that dark element, kind of in the same way that people really got drawn to Batman and the X-Men.
But you mentioned like Dragonlance and some of the stuff. If you also think about like other like writing and pop culture that was going on in that sort of early stage, you've got like Dean Koontz, you've got a lot of like really like dark horror, and like a lot of that was really just sort of the general vibe of the times too, and that sort of
Clive Barker was hitting really well
Clive Barker was hitting, like Night Shift, all that stuff was going on, and that stuff is all very like horror themed. And I think and also you didn't have, one of the things that has made sort of 5e so popular is the actual play, as you guys know. You guys are doing it. But it's
thank you, Critical Role.
But that's the thing, is like people get to watch people play different styles of games. I remember the first time I had played primarily with like my friends from grade school. Like we had taught ourselves how to play, and we were playing mostly there. None of us we played what we could understand from the games. And the first time I played with somebody who was a better DM, frankly, than I was at 15. You're like, oh my gosh, you mean I'm allowed to like do character voices? Like we can we don't just have to do exploration and combat.
We did not
and
do
then figure out how to
voices
spend our
in the
money.
70s.
Like nobody did any of that. Like the idea of a social plot was like, no, I spent
100%.
all my time drawing tiny little, I've got them somewhere around here, drawing tiny little maps on graph paper with like the keys, and then I would draw what was in the rooms, and like that was it, and you got 250,000 copper pieces, and you had to figure out how to get it out of the dungeon. For me to that point, like the big eye pop or like a head explode sort of thing is when I was transitioning from Dungeons and Dragons and that mindset of it's
kill, explore, loot. What did I get?
Yeah.
You know, kill, explore, loot. Okay, cool. I got something cooler. When I stepped out of that and I started playing Robotech for the first time,
Oh wow,
such a
awesome.
huge difference between the two.
Yeah.
Because Robotech now, especially the way we were playing it, because we're all Veritech pilots, so it took on a Top Gun feel, which is
nice.
nothing like Dungeons and Dragons. So now you're living out that I got the need for speed, and now it's like it's like everything at that point became barrel rolls. It became it was no longer
how do I do the coolest thing.
Yeah,
right?
Or the stunt, or I need a cool call sign. I need so it's like it took it more into a role playing element, which conveniently enough I started playing with somebody completely new. Which, to your point, that's all you had. Like, if you were lucky enough to find somebody else in another group adjacent, that's how you kind of learned as like, oh, that's how that's supposed to work, or oh, that's cool. I didn't even think about doing that for role play, or or that we could role play,
Well, we've learned basically off of watching actual plays and the idea of like the structure, the formatting, because we have an actual play, we want it to be successful, and for a while we were kind of just like doing our thing and like hoping that it landed. But over the last year, we've kind of learned that
what's the science of this?
There is like kind of a format and like how often do you do combat and things like that. And I know for me as a DM, I've really struggled because I'm like, I just want to tell a story. I'm a novelist. I write stories. This is what I do. I do a story. So that's been a real big learning curve. I can't even imagine trying to do it without.
So this is a question for you then, as somebody who writes a story and wants to tell like a more linear story, right? You have as a DM, you have a vision of a story in mind. So Michael and I play in a sort of a homebrew setting that I started, and Michael and I have been collaborating on, called the Shattered Chasm, which is sort of like a Western themed environment. It's basically modeled after the Grand Canyon.
Ooh.
Nice. With like all these like little settlements in and around that sort of terrain. The idea that you could have two towns that are just separated by like a high ridge, and so you can kind of just drop things in anywhere you want to. But there's we've set up like a few main villains, we've set up some factions, and we have all these towns, and as we sort of build out and drop NPCs in places, we're using the same NPCs and those sorts of things. But there's no storyline per se except what the characters drive. How does that, when you guys are setting up like your campaigns, are you guys trying to, I know actual play is different, right? I've talked, I've listened to Brennan Lee Mulligan and some other people talk about, they have story beats that they need to hit, which is different than just sort of like a big wide open terrain. How do you guys manage that on your end?
It's actually
good question.
It's actually fairly easy for us because we do a one-on-one, we do a duet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know her, and so I know exactly what buttons to push to get her to go to the next storyline point.
He can manipulate my character very easily.
This is one thing we talked about as far as, duets versus if you've got a whole party, is that with the party, okay, you got a bunch of different motivations, a bunch of different character backstories. I have to worry about her character's backstory, and pushing her character's backstory's buttons, and I just get to take her where I want her to go. So you actually doing a duet like this, you're able to do that linear storyline much really easier. Versus if you're in a party with lots of different people, it becomes
like me.
I'm gonna make the pitch for the linear storyline, because like Andy is much. As you can try to tell, Andy's a much looser person than I am.
You're more like Weston, and Andy, you're like me.
Yeah, right. But I'm a planner,
that's
right?
Yeah.
Andy sort of makes fun of me because I'm like, I still haven't written my 31st page of the whatever that I'm writing.
The outline of the so and so. I'm like,
he's like, I'm like, Andy, I'm kind of stressed out this week. I'm only 7 episodes ahead of my party. He's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's totally Wes.
Right.
Oh my god.
But
I have the next 3 months planned.
I do, right? And I actually have all the. But the key here is that linear adventure does not mean railroading.
No.
And I think I can't say this often enough. That like having a story structure, you what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring your characters and let them have agency, but you can still have 4 options or 3 options,
Yeah.
they get to choose which 3. You might even make it so that the 3 happen in whatever order they choose, but you can still choose which thing they do. The trick is to write to the level and build to the level that you're comfortable with, and then be super flexible on the back end.
Yeah.
And you know, there are lots. Go like, look, not all of us are doing actual play. A lot of us are just playing with our friends. Go get lots of modules, grab and steal from whatever modules you want, drop things in so that if the characters want to go do something different, you've got something that you didn't plan. You just go grab something and you drop it in. I'm always looking at one shots and just saying, how could this one shot fit in if the characters wanted to go in a different direction, just so I have a different feel for them. And again, giving everybody agency creates tons of fun.
No, I would agree with that. I like when we have played, you know, basically because it's the 2 of us, it's a fairly linear storyline. But there are things that choices that Weston would make that I was like, okay, this is kind of where the story is going. I want to get to this place, and I know that like he's gonna have a big reaction to this thing. But then he'll like decide to go to the left instead of the right, and I'm like, okay, so like, let's go check out the local herbalist and find out what she has to offer. And I'm like, I hate you.
Or let's go to the library and I want to look up books. What book titles do I see on the shelf?
Yes,
She
okay,
is
so he
great.
did that.
You're
She is so
mean.
good at making it up on the fly, though. She is.
I am
Okay,
really
what do
good.
we
So
do?
he wanted a history book of the
Boneyard,
which is basically the underworld.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, at the beginning of the book, and I start just like he's like, well, let's get farther than this part of the story. I'm thinking, I am so glad that I spent the last week studying what the underworld or what the boneyard is, because this is really frustrating. And we cut the stream that night, and I was like, what are you doing?
Having fun. Granted, her character is a champion, which is a paladin of Pharasma, who's the goddess of the underworld. So it's like,
Yeah,
I
it
knew
makes
this was
sense.
lore points that she
That I
knew.
knew.
But that's the thing. Like, that's again one of the advantages of us just playing with the 2 of us is I
Right.
know her character, I know her backstories, I know what she knows, and so I know what I can pull on, and I know where not to go, and I know what things, if I throw this out there, she's not going to care a lick about it. You know, and that makes it so that way. Again, I'm not railroading her, but I know what things to pull on that will pull her
Right.
heartstrings, and then she'll go that direction naturally as part of her character. That's like with you.
Well, doing a
We had that
party is
side
same
quest
way.
at that side quest thing, and you're like, oh, there's an ancient wizard there with expansive amounts of knowledge, and my character Az is like,
Yes. You would like me to do what?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew, like,
But
yeah, those types of things. But I think that, you know, we did have a couple of guests, so I was able to experience DMing with more than just Weston. And like that, first off, was way easier for me as DM. I could just sit back and let them interact with each other, and that was really nice.
Yeah.
But secondly, it was just pick the thing that I know is going to motivate those other characters to do stuff. So I feel like in that way.
That's a great piece of advice, because I think one of the things that a lot of DMs forget, particularly younger DMs, or I mean younger in their whenever they've started, one of the hardest things to know is like is how to get your characters to care about the world they're in.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it, you know, you obviously know each other really well, so you're able to play off of your knowledge of each other to sort of do that. But like particularly when you're playing with a party you don't know so well, it's really easy for the DM to mistake their lore for something that anybody cares about.
Yes.
And
100%.
most characters don't. And so, you know, what Andy and I talk about a lot is how do you structure your gameplay in such a way that you can suck the characters into, and so it's constant like test and runs, like you're throwing NPCs at them, you're throwing situations at them, see what sticks, and then leverage that and rebuild on top of it. It really brings the characters in as you test the waters. I try to do lore drips, not lore dumps. I try to do I try to let the characters that want to build really deep backstories, I bring them into the early part of the campaign. The characters that don't, I let them get their sea legs under them and sort of figure out what their character is, and then talk to them about their character backstory. You know, so like there's 2 characters in my current game. We're 10 games in, and we only really talked about their backstory a week ago, because they were sort of trying to get their sea legs on what their was, and it was cool. And now they're into it.
I think one of the things that I've seen and that I've started to use, and within the group one of the groups that I play with, is trying to tie backstories together among characters, right?
Mhm.
So if you've got 4 characters, have them tell you, okay, how do A and B know each other? Are A and B are brother and sister, or they grew up together, and so then how do C and D know each other? and then you can kind of build that web. It helps them understand the relationships and how the characters are gonna interact, but it also gives you an opportunity, and then ask them, like, who are other people that you might know, like parents, who are your other significant others, because all of those things are hooks, tokens, whatever you want to call them, that you can then like reach into when you're hitting that moment of like, okay, what happens next? You can just be like, oh, you got a letter. You just got a letter from your mom. Oh, well, hey, your mom is actually also like, that's the favorite, that's the favorite aunt of this other character. Well, what's going on with mom? Like, mom needs you to come home immediately. Something's going, Timmy fell down a well, whatever it is.
Well,
I was like, and like those sorts of things can, back to the point of like, how do you build like a flavorful character, having some sense, not necessarily of the whole story, but like, what are those sort of like key relationships that a character might have that you as a DM can start to kind of, frankly, play with, uses levers to drive the characters where you want them to go,
manipulate them. It's okay.
Well, and in a way, you think about
it's all emotional and manipulation.
Yes. Well, you think about in a way, this is all homebrew, because it's like, even if you're doing a module, homebrew a little bit and make a connection. There was one podcast I listened to that was doing Rise of the Rune Lords, which is the earliest module for Pathfinder, and what they did was one of the players had GM'd it before, so we knew the story. So they're like, okay, we're gonna make this interesting. They made him a member of the community. So he's a player character, but he lives in the community. So he can give pieces of lore here and there.
Nice.
Can interact. And it
It's a
suddenly
really good idea.
made it very interesting, and you cared because he had back experience with all these people. This, main character that's a bad guy, I knew her as a child, and we used to play together, and suddenly it all means something.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a great way to handle metagaming. That's brilliant. Love it.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to get into now, we've got less than 20 minutes left. And so there is one other thing I want to get into. So we've talked about a lot of this flavoring, getting a concept and then figuring out, how do I make this work? What do you do when it doesn't work? When there is the need for some homebrewing of mechanics in order to make it work? Because I know you guys have created some races, you've created some different things like that. So when the time comes to like, okay, I want to do this, it doesn't exist. What's some advice or some process you can give to our viewers on when they want to start dipping their toes into actually doing some homebrew of mechanics as opposed to just flavoring?
And just so you guys know, this is a purely selfish question, because Weston is homebrewing a world right now that has very different mechanics.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn over to Andy first, and then I've got some thoughts.
Great. So let's see. I think there's some stuff that I think is pretty straightforward. If you want a singular magical item, Dawn's Bane, a necromancer, morning star that'll allow them to raise more undead than they might otherwise be able to. Who the hell knows? I think that stuff's I think that's pretty easy for people to kind of, like, if you're talking about dipping your toes in, that's a great place to start dipping your toes in. I think the big mistake that I see with a lot of homebrew is people fall in love with their homebrew, and they want it to be the most awesome, most cool thing. And so then all of a sudden, Dawn's Bane goes from a +1 morning star that maybe allows you to cast Animate Dead once a day to Dawn's Bane is a +3 legendary weapon that casts darkness in 120 feet that's totally unseeable and everything, and any dead thing within that space is automatically raised. And like, It might.
breaks
It
the game.
sounds epic, but it might be a little much, especially for that party of like 5th level adventurers. Like, they're gonna get screwed.
I
So,
joked with Hayley the other day. I'm like, what if D&D worked like Diablo, to where it's just random drops, and so suddenly you get this epic level, item at level 5.
Here, so there's that, right? And I think so it's possible to go overboard, and so I would always encourage people to like restrain themselves, partly because the GM, as a game master, you have all the tools, right? You can TPK a party at any point.
Yes.
Hey, guess what? Meteorite falls out of the sky. You're all done.
And everybody's dead.
And everybody's dead. We're going to start a new campaign. Right? And that's not fun, but it definitely. So as a DM, or as a GM, you're trying to sort of find that balance.
Yes.
Of like, how much do you give? And honestly, I think it's a little bit of experience. I think I try to err where I give maybe a little bit less, because it's always easier. Once you give something, it's very hard to take it away.
Yes.
I think that's the big thing that will like ruin fun for players, is if you say, hey, here is this amazing sword, here is this amazing thing. Oh, it's too amazing. Sorry, guys. I just gave a legendary Holy Avenger to a 1st level paladin. That's pretty badass.
Yeah.
And
For those non people who aren't as familiar with D&D, Holy Avenger is like sort of top tier,
It's like a
weapon
level
that you can
20,
possibly get.
right?
It's like a +3, does all kinds of crazy stuff.
Oh, it's only +3 now?
I think they nerfed it down to +3. It used to be like +5 or something insane.
You could, an old school D&D, you could get it from like +1 to +5.
Yeah.
Holy
So,
cow.
+5 Holy Avenger was like, you were essentially, it's a god tier weapon, right?
Yeah.
You're just running around, as so you can, it's very hard to pull that stuff back. Now, to be said, if you make that mistake, I always say, like, try to figure out how to fail forward. So if you do give you give a really amazing weapon to this party, and they pull it out, the first time they pull it out, they have this amazing scene, they kill a bunch of stuff, a bunch of people do that, everybody wants that thing now, right? So you can turn that into a plot hook if you want to.
Yeah, you're 100%.
But
Now they have to get it back. It gets taken away.
Or it gets taken away, and they have to get it back, like whatever it is. I think, but in general, my advice would be to like pull it back a hair, because it can be, if you spend all your time as a DM giving somebody presents and then yanking them back, it's just not a great time for your players, and they're going to get bummed out, right? The players want one of
epic.
probably they want one of like 3 things, right? They want to level up. My players ask after every session, do we level up? No, we haven't leveled up yet, because it was a day since we leveled up in game time, right? Like, take a deep breath. We're not. They want to level up. They want to get gold.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to spend gold, but they want to get gold anyway. Old school players know the only way you leveled up, it was not killing monsters, it was getting their treasure.
Getting the gold.
Every gold was
one
one
experience
gold, one gold point, one
Oh.
gold piece equaled 1 experience point.
See, and
And
I
then-
would be so bad at that, because I don't care about gold at all.
Yeah. It's the best thing that ever happened to D&D was the idea that you could have sort of event-based leveling up rather than gold and killing monsters, because it created bad behavior.
And then the last thing that they want is they want like unique stuff.
They do.
Right. So those are the rewards that you can give players to motivate them to things. You can send hey, you got to go to the dragon. You're going to kill the dragon because you're going to get a lot of gold, or you're going to get a lot of cool stuff, right? Or you're going to make some bargain with the dragon to give him something, and he's going to give you something cool, whatever that is. Like, so, but again, I would always I very rarely do. I try to give people interesting stuff that's not necessarily super powerful. Hey, here's a blindfold that you tie around your face, and you tie around your eyes, and it literally covers up your eyes. You lose all your regular vision, but you get blind sense out to 30 feet, whatever your normal range of vision is, right?
Yeah.
That is
That's
a
pretty
cool thing.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Not particularly OP, right? That's sort of the balance that I'm always trying to sort of strike is, and then on a world building level, like in the Shattered Chasm, like the premise of the Shattered Chasm is there's a sort of gold rush element to it where all these metals in the chasm have been transformed into magical metals, right? So you can collect shattered gold. You can take shattered gold and hand it to a smith, and they can craft something out of that, and it has an affinity to, I think, fire. So then all of a sudden you have a dagger made out of shattered gold that is like a fire dagger +1, right?
That's
So it's a way to
cool.
like kind of like, but again, it's a little bit of a MacGuffin, right? It's there of like, oh, hey, everybody's trying to mine the shattered, all this stuff and get all this stuff, and it has value, but you have to turn it into something else, you know?
So my answer is going to be a little bit more, not practical,
Am I too
detailed.
abstract?
Yeah, a little bit more specific. The answer for so Andy talked a lot about sort of creating magical items and creating sort of artifacts in the world, and I think that's really all. Andy and I are 100% aligned on that. You need to dial everything back. That you think you do something, and then you need to dial it back 2 steps. I think the trick for that or new mechanics, read how they write the game mechanics. Read how they write the game design. The trick to good game design is in the language and the way they write the elements. D&D 5e is the best written TTRPG out there, in my opinion, because they slavishly work. Now, they don't always get it right, but like the new multiverse piece, they've done a lot of correction on the way they're handling language to make sure that the rules as written are also the rules as intended. Again, it's really hard in a game as expansive as D&D, but the trick for you as you think about mechanics is look at the way things are written and as you start to do it, reflavor existing mechanics in the way you want them to work and see if they maintain the balance, and practice that a little bit so that you can then start to introduce new mechanics that are written in the same tone and manner and using the same language, and then play test it. I play test a huge number of my encounters with my characters because I've got all their character sheets on D&D Beyond. I've got my big bad evil guy. I actually play test battles just to see if I've got sort of some of the balance right. Andy makes fun of me because he's like, "You did what?" And I'm like, "I
that is a lot of time I do not have
just to see what would happen." But like, you can play test. Like, the great thing about the new mechanics and the way the systems work is you can play test it. You've got their character sheets. You can play test it, right? Like, you can do that work to see if it's, or throw it out to the community. Twitter's fantastic. You can throw these things. Reddit, you know. Say what you will about Reddit, but you can throw these things out to the community and get feedback. As long as you've got thick skin, you can get feedback on your play test. Because the trick is you just don't want to overbalance it to the point where you're constantly course correcting as the GM, right? Yeah. Because that's really it creates more work for you. So, language and play testing are your best friends, especially if you're going to introduce whole new mechanic sets.
Yes.
And you can go look at how other people have done it. You can go read, the Cobalt Press. They've got all stuff. Their language is a little less crisp, so you can actually sort of see some of the mistakes. I love Cobalt Press. I buy everything they do, but their language is a lot less precise, and you can see some of the flaws that get introduced in their mechanics because their language is less precise. So because what you don't want is you don't want your characters or your players trying to rules lawyer you about your homebrew mechanics. It's painful.
Thankfully, he only has to worry about me.
Yeah, right.
At the moment.
At the moment.
Well, I see that. Like, if you write it
you get
to
play
where
test with each other.
Yeah. Well, if you write it to where there's a gap, like, oh, it says it this way. Does that mean I can do this? And it's like,
Now that said, you as the GM, and I think this may be a little bit where, I don't know, Michael and I don't have there's not a lot of air gap between where we are opinion wise. You're the GM, right? It is your job at the end of the day is to be the arbiter of rules as written versus rules as intended and that includes within your own material, right? So if you say, hey, I want to make armor out of shattered gold or shattered mithril, and it's 100%, super magic resistant. I'm going to make this, and it's going to, no spell ever is going to affect me. Well, I as a GM would say, well, that's not what I intended. So you're going to have to come up with a better, we're going to have to figure something else out between the two of us, and it should be a dialogue, but it doesn't. But you as the GM get to say, they're your toys, right? You get to say like, hey, I'm taking this toy back. If we're going to have this argument about this, I don't, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. I may have written it poorly, and I apologize, but let's take two steps back, because you're going to wreck my fun. Mm-hmm. I'm here to have as much fun as the players are. Yeah. Like, you're going to wreck my fun if you keep abusing this thing that I'm trying to introduce.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing is, don't be afraid to retcon, right? Oh, yeah. You can make a decision in the moment because somebody said something really cool and you went with it, but then upon reflection, you're like, that's going to break the game. Yeah. You can. There's nothing. This is as open-ended a system as there ever was. Mm-hmm. Retcon it. Say like that was. That you got the favor of the gods last week. This week the gods are not on your side.
That's true.
It's so funny. Yeah. So much of what you're saying just reminds me of being a dad. And it's like, I'll say something to my kid, and my kid will be like, find some shade of way that I said that.
Best rules lawyers there are on the planet.
Yeah. GMs. Yeah. That's a great way to think about it. You as a GM, you are the parent with a bunch of, ideally they're not squabbling toddlers as your players. Ideally they're other slightly more mature people, but they're there to, everybody's there to have fun, but you do need somebody to help kind of like create some boundaries, right? And it's just like parenting, just like owning a dog for all those people who aren't parents. You just want to be consistent in your rules. The more consistent you are about how you GM, the better the experience will be for everybody involved.
Well, I've got something I think that ties between those two. Something that resonated with me a lot, and I know you two have probably seen a lot of these. Like Dragon Magazine was like, for early D&D players, it was it. And they came out with an article. I don't remember what issue it was, but they came out with an article that talked about like, do's and don'ts. And one of the big ones that stuck out with me was basically don't turn your game into Monty Hall.
Yeah.
And
Monty
what is Monty Hall?
That was issue 26, Jerome. Issue 26.
Oh goodness!
Oh my God! So Monty Hall. I guess the current thing would be to say Wayne Brady. Don't turn your campaign into Wayne Brady. Do you guys?
I know who Wayne Brady is, but I don't get it.
So he does. There's I can't remember the name of the show now. It was
even the Man Show.
Yeah. Basically, the idea was the show was you dressed up in a costume and you got pulled out of the audience and you got to pick from one of 3 doors. And they would have a reward in it, and then you could like pay to, he would pay you. You could open one door, and then he would either give you money. You could have what was behind that door, or he would give you money.
Okay.
Or then you could open up the other door. But the idea was you just got, for very low effort, you got these huge rewards potentially, or you got
and it was very wildly and what you could get and not get. And my big takeaway from that was and this has spanned over the years, and I know you guys have probably run into this too. Now that the gaming space especially has increased, you'll get these people that play in other home games, and they come up and one of the first things they say is, my character can do blah 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 and kill X amount of blah 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 blah, and it's like it's way overpowered already.
Yeah.
So they homebrewed, or they grossly pumped up what it was, the books. My takeaway from that is the perception. Like, always look at especially when you're homebrewing, look at your game and step back and say, if somebody else looked at this, am I going to cringe if my players are kind of pumping it up? Or am I going to get a sense of legitimacy? And what I say by that is that,
100%.
And again, it's not that you want to downplay the people, because the person who's relaying that and they can kill all these things, they're still having fun, right?
Yeah.
But they probably didn't work for it. So the people, when I look for that feedback, are the ones that say, hey, we got into this dungeon. It took us forever to figure out this trap or whatnot. Next thing you know, like 2 of our people are down, and I fired this arrow, it hit just right and saved the whole party, sort of thing. It's like this death-defying. I'm picturing Indiana Jones, last minute crunch. that's an epic scene. That's something that somebody's going to walk away from and go, that was cool. And especially if they had like a custom character or whatever happened with it. And that just reflects not only well on you and your homebrew, but you as a storyteller as well, as a dungeon master, because it means you're probably doing something good in the way of balance. You're also doing something well in the way of keeping everybody engaged, but they're also working for it. So they're getting that appreciation out of it. You know, so, and it's, I mean, I know I kind of framed that kind of bad. And again, it's not to downgrade anybody who might say that, but that's one of the first red flags that I would hear as a storyteller. It's like, as soon as I start hearing that from another game, I'm all, ooh, it's probably not a game for me. Yeah, that's way too much, way too easy.
I think that's a great way to frame it, because I do think, you know, at the end of the day, we do all of this to create these stories and these memories that we have of them. And when those memories are much more valuable when there's perceived effort in achieving the goal, right? You know, if it was just like, oh, hey, you're a little commoner in a village and there's a sword and a stone, and I walked up and I yanked the sword out of the stone and a dragon appeared and I stabbed it and it died and now I'm king. Like, you would be like, great.
Yeah.
Great.
I've seen that Disney movie.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
The struggle is what makes it memorable.
It was 64 minutes and then you were done.
Yeah, I heard somebody, I guess it was Brennan Lee Mulligan, was describing it as, you know, like the characters want to go from a straight line of the start of the adventure to the end of the adventure, right? And as a GM, our job is to introduce as many curves and turns in that never stop them from getting to that end goal, but give them some hurdle to go around, or something that they have to navigate, right? You want to give them enough stuff that is an interesting flow. There's an interesting flow to that story, and it's not because the character wants the straight thing, but the player, and I think that's a great distinction to make, the player wants they want all the curves and turns and twists and all the rest of that stuff.
Well, you think about the adventure is the thing that happens between those points.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I feel like that was the quote for the show.
Which it is 9:30, so it is. We're actually hit time today, and we want to respect the time of our guests.
We do.
So thank you so very much for joining us for this episode. I think we had some really great conversation. And real quick before we go, I want you once again, if you would just state who you are, what your podcast is again, so anyone who wasn't here earlier can know where to find you on the different things.
On the different places.
Yes.
So I am Andy Davis. I'm one of the co-hosts for the Dadvantage podcast. We are available on all the podcast places, on Apple and Spotify and all the other wonderful things. We are a podcast where two old school dads, Michael and I, talk about new school play and how to be a good DM and how to be a good player and how to enjoy 5e.
And I'm Michael Hall, and all the things Andy said. And a quick question for you all is, how did the Tabaxi, where did the Tabaxi go after losing his tail? So Tabaxi are cat people. Where did the Tabaxi go after losing his tail?
I don't know where.
You went to the retail store.
Jesus.
Oh, jeez.
For dad jokes that bad and more, follow us at @the_Dadvantage on Twitter.
Yes.
And find us on Facebook at that Dadvantage podcast.
And you can find their podcast pretty much, I've noticed it pretty much anywhere that podcasts are available.
Yes.
Yeah, anywhere where podcast is, we are
on.
Jerome, do you want to give a quick plug for yourself?
Yeah, so Jerome Lambert, I'm with Lost Tribes Gaming, and you can find us on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube under the same name. I have a Twitter. I don't really use it, but it is Lost Tribe Gaming. I couldn't get the S in there for some reason. I'll go ahead and throw one out. It's not super D&D specific, but the farmer had 297 cows. When he rounded up, he found that he had 300.
Oh my god!
Wow, bad math joke.
That was awesome.
I've got one. So long as we're wrapping up on all this.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Can a monk catch a throwing star in midair?
Yes.
Sure it can.
Yeah.
a shuriken is okay.
Nope, it's okay. It's fine. I do have one though. I'm not a
Okay,
dad, but I
Hayley,
can say
go
it.
ahead.
Oh wow, yeah, go for it.
Okay, why do paladins wear chainmail?
Oh, why do paladins wear chainmail?
Because it's holy armor.
And
I
I'm
love
Jesus.
those.
and I'm Weston, the other half of Party of Two. Thank you for being here. The
Oh,
joke,
I don't get to say anything though.
I thought you.
You know,
okay, go
no.
ahead.
I just told a joke. I didn't get to introduce myself. It's fine.
We know who you are.
I
Everyone knows
am
who you are.
so famous. I'm infamous.
There you go.
Go
Good
ahead,
answer.
do it.
Good
Love it.
answer.
We are Party of Two. I am Hayley. Across from me is Weston Bell. We are so happy to have gotten to talk to you guys tonight. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thanks for having us.
And I'll say, what happens when a dark elf casts sleep on you?
I don't
You
know.
get drowsy.
Oh Jesus!
Oh yes! Oh, that was a good reaction for a dad joke there.
You get.
Yeah.
Oh,
And let's
that
go
was a
ahead and
serious
let's
groaner.
see,
Okay.
let's see who we can raid. And we will raid into another channel and see who's going tonight.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing.
So we have got, I think Ink and Liar. I know they do a lot of homebrew
Yeah, they do a
adventures and
ton of
such. So
homebrew
we've been
stuff.
talking about homebrew and homebrewed worlds and such. So let's go ahead. They are just starting, it looks like.
They start
So
really
let's
late. So
go
yeah.
ahead and raid into them. So thank you all so very much for being here,
Jump on the
for
raid.
being with us. So jump on the raid, and remember. Do you want to say it? Do you want to say it?
What?
And remember,
It only takes two.
Good night, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
I didn't know what you wanted.